Okay, so yeah, so let's dive. Oh, wow, you already have 9 questions for me. Perfect. All right, so the first one, is it good to attend a top math camp in the summer after junior year? I would say yes, especially if math is one of your core strengths and you're looking for a major that is so at least somewhat math related. That would be great. I would say if you looked at the MIT website and just type in MIT summer programs, they do have a list of recommended math programs. So you will see some of the more common names there, like Promise, Stanford's SUMAC program is on there. USA Canada Math Camp is on there. So there are a ton of really competitive math programs that you can access as a high schooler. Oftentimes, though, I will give you advance warning, whereas some summer programs, the application involves largely writing essays. For math programs, as you well expect, they're going to have problem sets or what they call PSATs for you to work on, right? These are very challenging math problems that you would need to work on and then submit because they will be looking at not just to make sure that you have good answers, but they're looking for like creative, interesting solutions to these problems. Okay, next is where can I take college credit courses during the summer other than community colleges? High schoolers have later registration dates and I might not be able to get classes I want. Well, I mean, there are a number of options. I would say if you can't access community college classes for any reason, well, okay, so first of all, before you say I can't access community college classes, just keep in mind that if it's an online class, you can access any community college across the country. If you live in California, if you live in Northern California, you can access Southern California community college classes. There are some colleges that aren't a quarter system, so they actually start their summer classes later because their spring quarter ends sometime in late June, right? So don't necessarily give up on the option of taking community college classes because it's a fairly cost-efficient option for getting college credits. There are also summer pre-colleges, although you'd want to basically kind of apply to them earlier. That would be a little bit more expensive, of course, because you're paying private school tuition. But obviously, it's going to look slightly more impressive if you're getting a summer pre-college from like places like Stanford or Harvard, of course, right? There are also some options like BYU Independent Study has an option where you can do things that are self-paced college coursework. It doesn't necessarily have to align with the summer months if you know it's a little tricky for you to go ahead and fit it into like your summer months. Okay. Next is a student asks, I'm getting an A minus in Spanish 3 honors. Should I still take AP Spanish next year if I got a 5 in AP Chinese? Well, I would say overall, if you think you can pull an A in AP Spanish next year, it might be worth considering because the A minus in Spanish 3 honors might just be because of the teacher. You might want to do your research and find out whether or not the AP Spanish teacher might be easier potentially, even if the subject matter is a little bit harder. If you really don't feel like you're that good at Spanish, though, then yes, you can rest on your laurels because if you have a 5 in AP Chinese, that would fulfill the foreign language requirements. But like I said, the most competitive colleges want to see that you finish what you started. So of course, it looks slightly more impressive if you could go ahead and take AP Spanish and eventually even get like a 4 or 5 in AP Spanish test. Okay, next. For my junior year next year, I'll be taking 5 AP classes. Very impressive. Should I take a 6th class? If so, is it better to do a lighter performing arts class or computer science class? Or is it better to focus on the 5 classes and extracurriculars? That's kind of difficult for me to answer without much more context. I would say if you manage to handle a certain number of AP classes already sophomore year, and you didn't have to work that hard, then taking 6 might be possible. But it's definitely something I would not take lightly because many students feel like if you take 6, it'll consume all your free time, right? So 5, I think, would probably be sufficient for most students. I would say for the majority of students, that's what I would recommend. For some really select hardcore students that can handle that 6th and still juggle all an impressive list of extracurriculars, then I would probably say, sure, if you think you can handle it, right? But that's very far and few between. I think it's probably better for you to just go ahead and stick with 5, to be honest, as a broad general recommendation if you're planning to take 5 already. Okay, assuming, of course, you've already gotten straight A's so far. If there's any reason to worry about that, like if you've struggled a little bit with 10th grade, even 5 might be too much, potentially, depending on the student. Okay. Next is for STEM students, would it hurt to change to top school if the honors English grade is a B plus in 9th grade? Um, I mean, a B plus isn't anything like, especially in ninth grade, it's still early in the game, right? So as long as you manage to get like straight A's the rest of the way, you can still be very competitive for a lot of top schools. I wouldn't necessarily say change majors or change whatever schools you're aiming for. Just see how you end up doing in 10th grade, right? So usually by the end of 10th grade, by the first semester, 11th grade, you'll have much more of a sense in terms of which schools you're competitive for. Okay, next is what are some summer speech and debate programs you recommend? I think for speech and debate, it really depends on which event you're competing in. So I would say, there are a lot of good LD programs, for instance, like there's a program called NSD. In California, there are a couple of locations where they have a program called VBI. If you're a policy debater, University of Michigan, Northwestern University are usually like the top choices. Dartmouth University are top choices. If you do a little digging, to be honest, if you're a speech and debater already, there are probably like forums where people discuss this. There are probably tier lists that people have put together. You can take a look at that. You can probably even get recommendations from like your coaches, right? Or people in the debate community. They'll be able to tell you which ones are best suited for your interests. Okay, next is what are some writing programs you'd recommend for a rising freshman? I mean, there's a number. I would say, that might be a good opportunity for you to go ahead and take a look at colleges that have pre-college summer programs that have like creative writing, for instance. You can't go wrong if you look at schools that are really, really strong for their English departments, right? So I would take a look at like just look up US News and see which schools have like very highly rated English departments and then look at their pre-college programs. Okay. Next is my child is currently in ninth grade and loves math, especially number theory, discrete math. Any recommendations for summer activities? Yeah. So like I said, even if you're current ninth grader, rising 10th grader, some of those same summer programs that I mentioned that are on the MIT website should be things that you can consider, right? Um, Now, some of those are probably not accessible to a rising 10th grader just yet, but there's certainly some programs that you can do even as a rising ninth grader, right? So definitely take a look at that list. Like I said, just Google MIT summer programs high school. If you type that in, there will be a list of recommended math programs. Okay. Next, what internship camp or project is good for a communications major? Wow, that's pretty broad, honestly. For communications, oftentimes you might want to look at journalism related programs to kind of like show your interest in communications or speech and debate programs because speech is obviously very related. For journalism, I think Northwestern has a program called like the Cherubs or something that's actually really, really highly rated for journalism and communications in general, right? But to be honest, explicitly for communications, it's a little harder, right? So you might want to look at like some summer pre-colleges as well to try to see if they have things that are explicitly for communications. Okay, so I'll probably have time for maybe 2 or 3 more questions because it started to kind of like pile up here on me. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and do the next 3 here. Okay, so you're obviously very welcome to join us next Friday for more Q&A if you have other questions that I didn't get to. Okay, so I'm a rising senior and I plan to major in biology on a pre-med track. Is it better to become a certified EMT during the summer, or is doing a research program in biology a better option? Um, I mean, there's probably a way for you to do both, right? So, because a research program doesn't always necessarily have to be like something that consumes your entire day, right? There's some remote programs so you can still do some academic research, and you can also go ahead and kind of go through the steps of, getting your EMT certification. So you can look at both. It just depends on what else you have. If you've not done anything research related, I would maybe give a slight nudge towards the research side as being slightly more academically impressive to colleges, right? Because it's harder to obtain that, right? I think going for a certified EMT thing, it's probably as long as you're willing to sign up for the program that more students can access that as opposed to like high level research. Okay. Do you have recommended summer programs for product design? It's a little harder. I've seen some design summer programs for I think for NYU and Carnegie Mellon, those are 2 programs that you'd want to look at for product design specifically. That would be actually pretty good. Okay. Next is, should rising ninth graders attempt the recommended courses or should they focus on preparation for these courses? Okay, I'm a little unclear about the question, but if you mean like taking actual courses in the summer, if the high schooler, if the rising ninth grader is already very competitive based on their middle school record, yes, you could probably take some during the summer. But honestly, since rising ninth grade, you're not even technically in high school yet, I would probably say a better use of your time would be to go ahead and just prepare for your upcoming freshman year classes. And then also using the summer to go ahead and maybe spend some time to do a little bit of test prep, a little bit of like, summer programs related to your major. I think that's probably the best use of your time. Okay. Yeah, so I'll do one last question here. Is it okay to not take AP history in grade 11, only STEM APs, but take it in grade 12? Uh, that is an individual decision based on what you think you can handle. I know some AP US history teachers are notorious for not giving good grades. If you feel like you need to sacrifice taking AP history in order for you to do well on the APs you have, that's certainly, something that you can do strategically. Of course, if I'm comparing to a student who did take AP US history and did well on all those classes, and on top of that had the same other APs you had, they would look slightly more competitive. But, like I said, it's a very individual decision, right? You don't want to necessarily take a very broad recommendation, like take all the hardest classes if you don't think you can do well on all those classes. It is a balancing act between having sufficient rigor in your transcript and also being able to have enough wiggle room that you can go ahead and still be able to get as close to straight A's as possible. Okay. All right. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all the time we have for tonight.